South Africa has hosted the third African Union Men's Conference aimed at galvanizing positive masculinity to end the worrying scourge of gender-based violence across the continent. The continental body has been pushing for adaptation of laws and policies to eradicate this crisis. I discuss this further with Associate Research Scientist at the African Population and Health Research Centre, Anthony Idowu Ajayi. Here's our conversation.
Men's Conference is an initiative of the South African president. But that was brought about by ex-president of Liberia, Helen Salib Johnson, reaching out to President Ramaphosa, as well as other leaders, other presidents, including the president of Rwanda, the president of Ghana, the president of Congo, the Congo DRC, and even the president of Comoros. To champion women empowerment and address gender-based violence, and it was a call that they took on board. And part of the ways to realize this objective is to have men's conference. Now the goal is to have men play leadership role in women empowerment. So it's like a he for she, men standing up for women to end violence against women and girls. So it's been a 3-year effort now, because it's the third conference, but it's also to consolidate all the efforts into a convention that then becomes laws that form parts of the country's law as part of the response to gender-based violence on the continent. But again, I would say that the goal is beyond eliminating gender-based violence. It's also about empowering women, about having more women included in decision makings, political positions, and in all decision makings.
Makes a lot of sense, but we've talked about this being the third installment, or if you will. Now, there's been the Kinshasa Declaration, there's been the call to action. So let's talk about progress that's been made in the last couple of years ahead of this year's conference. What are some of the milestones that we can talk of?
For me, having all these commitments, it's an important first step. But what's also more important is to have these commitments implemented. Because as you know, when the conferences held, there were a lot of promises and a lot of commitments. And part of the commitment is to put in place programs that would end violence against women and girls. It's also to have more African leaders commit to the cause. So maybe on that front, we've seen more African leaders supported the cause of ending violence against women and girls, including, at the initial stage, there were not this many presidents, championing this cause. But now we have so many presidents championing the cause. As I mentioned earlier, President of Rwanda, Comoros, Congo, Ghana, South Africa are leading the efforts. But they need to do more and convince all their other colleagues to join the cause. And of course, there's some progress there. But in terms of progress in terms of policies and programs, again, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I know many countries are doing things to end violence against women and girls. And I will say, even for a very pessimistic person, would say there is more attention to the issue, and there is also more prosecutions of violators, right? So there's progress in that sense. But the point is, the violation of any woman is wrong. And as such, if violation continues on our continent, then we would probably be asked to say maybe our efforts, we need to do more. So there's always a room to do more. We need more resources, for example, to provide support for victims, to provide shelters, to provide services for victims. Again, there's more that needs to be done in that regard. So generally, there's a lot that should be done. There is still gap in funding. There is gap in prosecution. As you know, not all cases are prosecuted. So there's more resources even needed for prosecution as well. Legal representation for victims. A lot. I can list so many things that need to be done on and on that hasn't been done because there's gap in funding. But that definitely we can count our progress, and I think we're moving to the right direction, because the idea of putting together a convention on ending violence against women and girls, which will be the first of its kind globally, it's a huge important progress. And given the timeline agreed upon, there will be a draft of that convention by December. It will be tabled for adoption in STC meeting in February. So all effort is being geared up such that by 2025, the convention will be in place and it will be ratified by countries. So for me, that is another important progress that we must highlight. But again, if you look at each and every country in Africa, over the past 3 years, you can point to things that each country is doing to end violence against women and girls.
There's a saying that says prevention is better than cure, or a stitch in time saves 9, which both speak to the same thing, and that is just how much focus is being put on preventing gender-based violence. I mean, there's this huge focus on, yes, it exists, yes, let's deal with perpetrators, but how about preventing perpetration in the first instance?
I was the mouthpiece of the civil society organization, and in the outcome statement of our pre-conference consultation, we recommended that there should be a strong focus on prevention. And we agree that prevention is better than cure. And we think it's important to prevent gender-based violence. And part of the strategies we are suggesting is the need to engage the young boys, men and boys, but more importantly, start early. Engage young boys. Let them embrace positive masculinity, which we believe are traits and behavior that embodies empathy, emotional intelligence, respect, leadership, non-violence. Those are some of the traits that the conference is also trying to canvas that men and boys should embrace.
So how
supporting gender equality?
Sorry, Anthony. So how will this be implemented? At what level? Is this going to be a social tool where there are going to be a number of clubs, for instance, that boys can go to if they feel like it, or if their parents subscribe to it? Or is it something more deliberate, like inculcated in the school curriculum, for instance? So in the same way that you will learn the national anthem of your country, or decree or promise to abide by certain rules and values, is that the level at which it will be instituted?
Yeah, the hope is that it will be cascaded down to schools' curriculum. But more importantly, as you know, not all young people are in school, even at primary school. But again, some of these norms, begin to take shape, I think, at age of 13, 14, which is a secondary school age. And not all young people transition to secondary school. So that it needs to go beyond what's taught in school. It should be taught in churches, in the communities, in clubs where the men and boys meet. And there are programs already that are doing that in South Africa, engaging coaches to train athletes. Don't just see them only as athletes, but then how do they become better boys, better brothers, better sisters, better men, husbands, So,
but
and there are coaches that are embracing
these minority groups, Anthony. I mean, we focused on minority groups. I mean, how many athletes are there versus individuals? So whilst I agree that not every kid goes beyond primary school, but the vast majority do. So surely for something as mass market as just looking at the statistics, right, of the prevalence of gender-based violence on the continent, across the length and breadth of Africa, it becomes critical for us to look for what is the most common denominator. Where do we find the most young men at any given time, and it would have to be school.
I agree. That we need to include positive masculinity in curriculums. And I mean, if we do that immediately, if all countries in Africa would do that today, we will be reaching millions immediately. Like in the next few years, several millions of young people would have learned about positive masculinity. They would have learned that it's not only through violence that you can show strength. You can also show strength by being empathetic, and I think it's important, and that should happen. And countries should not even wait until the convention is ratified before they can implement this.